I'm going to leap right in. So, Paul, you can go first.
So I'm Paul Fowler with the Wisconsin Institute for Sustainable Technology at UW-Stevens Point. And for those of you curious about the accent, like Macy, not everybody, in fact, sounds like me. From the north of the UK, been in Stevens Point since 2010.
Scott Steele. I'm the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Church Mutual. I'm an escapee from Illinois after 30-some years. Moved up here in 2018, been working up here since 2015, and I absolutely love it.
I'm also Illinois native. My name's Bill Bertram. I ran Marathon Electric here in Wausau for 14 years, and then I moved to Europe, ran a business in Europe for 4 years for the parent company. I'm very active in the outdoor rec area with a group called Iron Bowl, as well as the president of the Park Foundation. So we like to invest in park infrastructure.
Great. Well, hopefully everybody can see what we've been trying to move to. So we started out with the premise of you got to protect what you've got here. You got to figure out how to make that work for you going forward so that you're standing on a firm foundation. Then you talk about how you're going to attract people, which is the biggest gamble or problem at the moment, I think, that we're facing. So now we're going to step back a little bit and say, well, okay, if we want more people and we want to diversify the economy, et cetera, what strategies are we using? What strategies should we be using? What do we need more of? What do we need less of? And then the panel will follow this. We'll focus on the two big questions of, if that's what we need, how do we get it done, and how do we expedite it and scale it up? Two big issues. And again, so we were just talking about housing. We need the lowest number of new housing units we need in the state of Wisconsin right now is 127,000 by the end of this decade. By the end of this decade. And that is the lowest number. That assumes we don't recruit new people to the state. The harder number is probably 228,000, okay? And there are numbers like that in terms of workforce shortages, et cetera. So let me ask, I'm going to ask each of you to kind of give your opinion of what you think we're doing now, strategy-wise. What is it we're doing? Are we focused on recruitment? Are we focused on collaboration? Dave was reading off from your strategic plan. Use the workforce you've got, make the community more vibrant, grade it up, et cetera. Are those the right strategies? Paul, go ahead and kick it off.
So one of the things that attracted me to a position in Wisconsin 13 years ago was just the phenomenal natural resources that are here, whether it's water, forestry, agriculture. And so I think the opportunity and the challenge revolves around how do we position those things which to maybe many people's minds are sort of legacy opportunities and reimagine them for the 21st century. So last year I had the opportunity we talked about collaboration earlier, to collaborate with the Wisconsin Paper Council, the Great Lakes Timber Professionals Association, Menominee Tribal Enterprises, the DNR, Mid-State Tech College, and UWSP on an opportunity around the American Rescue Plan. It was the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And a real opportunity to say, well, what is a strategy around these, in some folks' minds, legacy businesses? And we kind of looked really deeply at the forest products industry. We talked earlier about the river in Wausau, right, being the sort of like that lifeblood for forestry and paper and logging some years ago. But we look on a global scale at what's happening in forestry and fiber use. We see that it's not a declining industry, it's not a declining sector. But how do we just sort of reimagine, reposition that around things like innovation, entrepreneurship, the opportunity around increasing workforce by building better and more substantive jobs in that position, all with a view to saying, okay, how do we keep our rural communities thriving and prosperous and so on? So I think everything that you hit on were things that we hit on when we were looking at at the regional challenge last year. So I think the opportunity to showcase diversification by commercialization of new materials is absolutely critical too. And that opportunity to increase capacity and capability to do innovation, absolutely critical in terms of attracting people into the region, right? We need sort of like landmark structures, sectors that say, yeah, that's a great opportunity for me to come and work and also take advantage of the amazing quality of life that's here. And that's why we moved here.
Great, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit different approach, a little different thought process. I think the strategies we've heard from all the different folks today are dead on. I think they're great. I think everything we're doing, but I think if we get back to really the foundation of what's going to make a change here, it's the people. It's the mindsets, it's the perceptions. There's no better ambassador for our area than the people that live here, work here, thrive here, raise families here. And what I've seen and what the reports show, and you can do whatever you want, is we have a division of mindset in these counties. We have some people are like, I don't want to change. I like the way things are. I'm happy. They don't understand why we need to change. They have the people that are out there, they want to make the change. They see the necessary effort to make that change. So I think whatever part of strategy we do or whatever we do, we have to make sure that we give people the opportunity to understand the truth of the situation. We can talk about programs, we can talk about this and this, but if we don't take the time to help them really understand the why we have to do this, we won't get the full support and activity that we need and really to make this a vibrant and growing place. Now I work with Merrill as a volunteer, and it's a smaller community, but there's 4 truths in Merrill that are challenges for them. And getting them to understand that, and they're getting around to it, was very important. One is declining population. We all know that. Okay, census shows it. Other part of it is it's an aging population. Census shows that. But why? Why is that important? Okay, I'm growing up here, I'm raising my family. Why is that important to me? We're losing our 25 to 45-year-old folks, whether they're individuals or their families. Okay? And that 25 to 45-year-old demographic is the pipeline of success for our businesses and our communities. Okay? So when you start putting the truths out there and something that they can start to put their perspective around and they can see around them, then they can become ambassadors and they can buy into what we're doing and they can support it. As we all know, we can come up with ideas, but people will fight it. I've always done it this way. I don't like it that way. I'm not comfortable doing it this way. But if we can really take the time to share with them the truth and the long-term reason why we're doing things, we're going to have a better chance of our strategies actually being successfully implemented.
Thank you, Bill.
Ask your question again.
The question is we've heard all of these bits and pieces, and I'm interested in your take on whether you think based on what you've heard, whether we're pursuing the right strategies, and if we are, what we could be doing to move them further, faster, okay? And if we're not, what are we missing here?
Okay. Just out of curiosity, how many of you folks are with HR departments? Just a raise of hands. And how many are with county governments or municipalities? And okay, and the rest of you are kind of a mix of everything in between businesses.
I can tell you because I've got the numbers. Okay, We've got a group that matches this and that so online. So about almost 40% are business representatives, which would include your HR people. About 13% are education. About 15% are economic development professionals. And then the rest is a mix.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to John Roberts. And in 2018, Dave Ekman hired TIP Strategies to come up with a 10-year forward-looking strategy for central Wisconsin, whatever central Wisconsin is in your minds. And I'm not sure it's ever been adopted. And I think one of the issues we have in central Wisconsin is called alignment. You know, you have lots and lots of great ideas in the municipality and in businesses, and it's this idea of aligning and having that elevator speech and that idea of what John said earlier. Everybody knows what Bend, Oregon is. Everybody today knows what Duluth, Wisconsin, because that's the west coast of the United States, and it's a lifestyle that you move to Duluth to because of the North Shore. And what we don't have here at the county level, from my perspective, or at the municipality level, or at the business level, is that type of alignment where we're all on the same page with that same elevator speech. And if I think it was Angel or her here earlier was talking about, boy, I can go out and tell people about the community. We have to do a better job than having me tell somebody about our community. And it's really that branding, if it's Base Camp Wausau or if it's another, one of those areas that draws young people here and keeps them here. And it is all about economic development, and every one of the earlier panels touched on a piece of that. But we are, in my opinion, losing that battle to people like Altoona and Eau Claire and La Crosse and Duluth and half a dozen other communities, not just in Wisconsin, but across the Midwest. And it's being on that same page and having that alignment.
Hey, John, welcome back. Thank you. Let me, again, rattle off the list that I've heard as we've talked about strategies and needs. So we've talked about process. We've talked about the importance of relationships, information, access, collaboration. And now Bill and others are starting to add the words alignment to the whole issue. I'm going to ask a question and see if I can't build on what you've been saying. The first question I would ask from a strategic point of view is whether we are targeted enough, okay? So have we really defined the crisis we're looking at? By everything that everybody said, but if in fact the most immediate crisis at the moment is that we don't have the workforce we need to be able to support the economy and the lifestyle and the objectives that are being laid on the table for the county, for the region, not just here in the Marathon area, but across the state. Don't we need to be discussing what we're doing around that particular focal point? So by way of example, picking up on Bill's last comment, and this is not an attack on Lance or Angel, obviously, we all have to do a better job of telling our story, but you have to add, it seems to me, the second question, and I'll ask you to comment on this. Who are we talking to? Okay? So who is it we need to tell the story more effectively to, and are we structured to do that? Okay? So, and I would put on that chart, for example, the employer community has an in-place process for finding people and recruiting people and where they're coming out of school or where they're coming out of med school or nursing school or whatever. Should we be narrowing our focus on the question of how do we get to those people with the kind of messaging that you want to talk about? The second piece, and then I'll let John kick off and then everybody can respond, is we heard talk about the need to use the resources we have available. And so we talk about natural resources. We talk about the educational infrastructure. And Bill talks about, or Scott talks about people. Well, how about kids, okay? So Josh Schumann and others are absolutely dead right. We've only ever in this country demonstrated the capacity to grow middle-class wealth with only two things: jobs and home ownership. Those are the only two things that over time have consistently produced and strengthened the middle class. If we do the job stuff right, whether it's early care and education, K-12, whatever, we have data that says when they do better in school or they do better in health, all sorts of costs go down and they become better risks, both for employment purposes, advanced education purposes, and housing and financial risk. What are we doing to give those kids buy-in to the community? Do we give them points for doing well in school that would help them get a better rate when they go to buy a house? Do we think about making sure that we're building the coalitions that we need with the employer community, with the educational community, so that that kid becomes an investment that you can bring up and through from a strategic point of view? And then lastly, I'd put on that list, what about the executive, the private sector executive community? I know we're all busy managing from Monday to Tuesday and Tuesday to Wednesday, but corporate private sector executives and public executives do something other people don't do. They process information, they make results-oriented decisions. Those who are good at it, it's a huge value as you're trying to figure out how to manage from point A to point B. John, jump on in there.
Well, and forgive me for being away for a few minutes. Happy to be back. I'm going to make the same point again, but in a different context. Knowing what other communities are doing, and let's talk about it as the competition. Knowing what the competition is doing as a template. It's not a roadmap. You don't follow it and get to the same destination, but you can look at what has been effective, because there isn't a community in the entire country that isn't faced with the talent challenge, the workforce challenge. There isn't a single one. We in Austin fret about that. We feel that we lead the nation in job growth and population growth. And we fret about that every day. We fret that we don't have enough of a talent pool. So you're not unique in this. And our, is Austin a fair benchmark? No, we don't use it as that. However, there are aspects to the success of communities that need to be put into this rural resurgence equation. And the role of events is a major part of that. You can't and shouldn't look at what makes a community appealing to those who aren't part of it. We make the distinction, Dave has heard this many times, between quality of life and quality of place. And forgive me for repeating that for those of you who've heard it before. The distinction is really important because you have terrific quality of life, but so does every other community in the United States. They all have the best quality of life because it reinforces the value of the citizens that are already there. Quality of place asks you to consider what you look like to someone who isn't there. And some of those factors are very difficult to address and others aren't. The role of an event strategy, for instance, to just use one example, has proven terrifically effective in communities that are your size. And Deschutes County, which is where Bend is, and Marathon County, which is where Wausau is, 20 years ago, they were the same population. Since then, Deschutes County has doubled in population. Why? And there are answers to that question. And those, are ones that I think we have shared to some degree and that we continue to nuance. I actually had a little PowerPoint presentation here spared from having to see it. But among the things that some communities find very difficult to accept is the linkage to the urban areas. You don't succeed because you define yourself as somehow completely separate from Stevens Point or from Madison, more importantly. Those linkages are part of the success of rural communities. And those linkages come in all sorts of important ways. Airfare is one of them. Air connections are one of them. Other ones include those events and how you draw those people, the effectiveness of a network that includes alumni. There's a long list, and I think Dave understands that list, but I think really being able to check off things that say, this is what we're doing in these areas to make us appealing. That's the path forward, knowing that you're not going to solve it. This is not a solvable problem. And Dave, you may remember we did a roundtable, and I think it caused some consternation, but not with the participants who were manufacturers and other employers, when we said, not how can we make workforce training more effective, but the problem that we posed to them, if you can't get the people that you need, what are you going to do? And that kind of realistic dose, I think, was an important step.
We understand what we want, which is more people, okay, with more vibrant communities, and greater sustainability, to put a fine point on it. We are in a major competition. I think John is trying to make that point. And so the issue, from my vantage point in competitive Wisconsin, is that we stop robbing each other, okay, and start figuring out how to bring people in from outside the state, how to up our retention rates, et cetera. The strategies for doing that are multiple, okay? Some of it is being driven now by the reality of ARPA money. You can get money for broadband, you can get money for early care and education, health care, et cetera. Is it enough money? Probably not, but you've got some and you can work with it. Collaboration has started to be a broader pathway than it has in the past. So the private sector and the public sector are probably talking more with each other than we have in the past. And the question then is, again, are we doing what needs to be done? What I put on the table was the question of whether or not we are using all of our resources. So are we thinking about raising that generation of kids? Are we getting the buy-in we need from the corporate executive community? Are we looking at the question of targeting in terms of, instead of talking about the elevator speech, understanding that you use elevated, that term comes from people with ideas that they're trying to sell to specific investors, okay? It's not a general, let me go out and buy TV ads to push Marathon County or whatever. Not saying you shouldn't do that under certain circumstances. So that's the piece I think that we're asking you to interact with. And I think what John was saying is, you've got a checklist of things that you know are going on in terms of the competition. I'll throw one more fact on there. The reality is that this has been an issue now for 5 to 7 years, at least. Other communities, other states across the country got to it faster than we did. And the game was, it was cash competition. Started out as municipalities putting money on the table. One of the factors we probably don't look at enough, in my opinion, is you empower people. That empowerment's an important issue for them. They all have their own individual issues. The more you can empower them to make decisions that address their issues, whether it's student debt or whatever else it may be, the better shot you've got in the competition. So, and if that's not broad enough and confusing enough, Bill, go ahead and pick a new field.
It is broad enough and it is confusing enough. So, so I take John's plan and I try to boil it down to other communities, both in central Wisconsin and to counties north of us. So a month ago I was up north and we were just talking about that in the county about growth and how to use their monies from the state and the federal government. And one of the folks there said, what makes you think we want those people here? What makes you think we want those people here? And I said, well, here are all the reasons that you'd want those people here. Because you're going to have this downward spiral on your housing. You won't have new business. You won't have innovation. You won't have that. But I've heard the same thing in Marathon County from some of the townships. When we talk about projects, we don't want you people here. So this idea of diversity through our old eyes, my old eyes, what diversity is versus our, the Zers and the late millennials is a completely different flip in how we see the world. And I think we need to look through their eyes and what attracts them to a community. And what makes Bend, Oregon, or Asheville, North Carolina, Asheville, or Durango, or Bozeman. They're winning. And you know, you go 90 miles west, you know, 9.3% growth rate for a county would be pretty exciting if you live in Eau Claire. And they're pulling people left and right out of the Twin Cities because the world has flattened, and people will live where they want to live because of the technology. And I think it does get back in terms of when I was in the Netherlands, I saw this business model that I had never seen here. We were silo communities. Businesses ran, and we bitched all the time about government and about education. Weren't getting the right kind of employees. You know, government was, you know, hemming us in. And when I moved to the Netherlands, it is a collaborative society where business and education and government move unilaterally. It was my responsibility almost on day one was to participate in their society, even though I was a foreigner. I was a resident there, but they expected me to participate. And I would come to meetings like this, and it was like the very first one I went to was crazy nuts how the Dutch will argue. And they'll argue about everything. But they get alignment in their society, and it is a bigger view than what we have. If Stevens Point wins, we win. If Marathon City wins, we win. If Wausau wins, we all, you know, we win. It's a little bit different view, and I think that's what, you know, to me, that's that secret ingredient here. That's our secret sauce, you know, and then how do we brand it, you know? And I that's what drives young people here and keeps them here. You know, I'm in Minnesota for a funeral a couple weeks ago, and I come down and I have a T-shirt on. It says Iron Bull, and the guy next to me is Chisel. Comes in and he's with the Department of Defense. He's 5 years from retirement, and he goes, "Oh, do you know anything about Iron Bull?" "Well, a little bit." And he goes, "I just bought 5 acres north of Wausau. So when I retire, I'm going to, you know, live up by towards Anago." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "It's outdoor rec. I have 120 acres in Iola, but that's not where I'm going to retire. I want to come here because of a central city and all those accommodations to make it even better." I think that's the part what we're missing here is that, again, having those open, honest discussions of what we're looking for at all levels, the government, the businesses, and, you know, to implement something that's strategic, and then you stay that course. And diversity is absolutely has to be a key component of that today. Looking through diversity through young eyes, not our eyes. So.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I actually wrote down the original question.
Where were you when I needed you?
And you ask, you know, who are we targeting the right folks? Who are we targeting? And I think, you know, when I look at what we're talking about today, I'm more on the Synergy side where I'm looking at the total region, not just the Marathon County. And we're all facing a lot of the same issues, but we all also each community has their own individual issue and their own individual challenges. And so when we talk about who we target, there may be one area that needs to target more of the manufacturer worker. There may be one area that needs to target more of the the white collar. There might be one that needs more tech. So I think as to go to your point on the collaboration point is there's no reason that while we're promoting our area, maybe one community is doing their, and an opportunity comes up that doesn't fit us, that we don't say, well, that's not right. We have to be able to say we're going to share. Because right now, a lot of what's happening in not just our state and a lot of states, and it goes to your point, is we're just cannibalizing our communities. We're just moving pawns from one to the other. I steal someone from Century steals someone from AmFam steals someone from Church Mutual. Okay? We're not growing the state. We're not growing our environment. We're not growing our economic development. We're just moving pieces around. So we have to really pull together when it comes to those situations of realizing. So I think that on our target, I think we have to look at what our communities need and what they can contribute to the greater whole. And then if they don't fit, be willing to share. Now to go to the second part of that, focus. That's probably one of the hardest things for anybody to do, because you're faced with so many challenges, you're faced with so many things, and you come up with a strategy, and you say, yes, we're going to implement this, and everybody buys into it, and everybody's heading down that path, and then a shiny object shows up, and everybody runs over there, and suddenly now you've fractured your focus. And then another shiny object comes up, or somebody says, I read this here, or I did this here, and you fractured it again. And what happens then is 5 years later, you're still dealing with the same problem because you never fixed your original focus. You never addressed your original focus. So when I look at these strategies, they're wonderful, they're great. But what we've got to do is stay focused on that North Star. Okay, we talk about attention, retention, and attraction. I want to switch that a little bit now to outreach. We can't worry about always attracting. We can't always worry about keeping. We have to go out. We have to put ourselves out there. Our company recently had it was 2 years ago, we have a thing called Diversity and Dialogue, where we invite different people from different perspectives to come in and talk to our employees. And we had a person from the Hmong community come in and talk about their experience. And it was a great opportunity for our employees to understand more about the Hmong community. Well, then we had some people in our company that decided, I want to do more than that. I want to have an outreach. And so we went down to the Wausau, and we toured their facilities down there. We've gotten involved down in the Milwaukee office. But then we did something we never did before. We thought, you know what? Nobody knows about Church Mutual. So we had an open house for the Hmong community. Okay, that was a little over 2 months ago. Since then, we've hired 2 Hmongs. Okay, because they said we had no idea where you were even located versus know anything about us. So as communities and as businesses, it's not just the attraction and retention. We got to put ourselves out there, because in order to put ourselves out there, that's going to commit to the communities, and it's going to show those people that we're committed to them. So I think focus, outreach, and whatever the first one was I said.
Been there.
So you asked about strategy, and something that just was occurring to me in terms of what the other panelists were saying was how far do you reach out? I mean, we talk about maybe some cannibalization of other positions within other companies, right, and going beyond the border of the state. But the question might be, should we be looking beyond the border of the states, right, and think about immigration reform? And if that's something that you add onto your competitive Wisconsin list of to-dos. Now, that's a long-term goal, right? Speaking from my own experience, 13 years it's taken me, right, to be able to become a citizen. It happened just a month ago. But it's a long, arduous process on both the employer and the employee, right? 6 months on a visa application just to come and work in the States, right? And it's not just about what's happening on the southern border. There's no shortage of people if we look globally, but if we look within the confines of the States, we see a declining population. But there's not a decline in population on a global scale. So what can we be doing now to make Wisconsin a fantastic place for folks from overseas to come and visit, and at the same time be lobbying around comprehensive immigration reform?
Let me by way of example, the idea of executive capacity. One of the people on our board of directors is a guy named Tim Sullivan, who's president of Bucyrus here. He got sold to Caterpillar, and he's a serial entrepreneur. And we were talking about the immigration question one day, and he was frustrated with, as we all are, with what's going on. But then he said to us, he said, you know, Jim, he said, there are already pockets of immigrants in this country. So yes, we should be in favor of immigration reform, but if you're asking me what can we do tomorrow, why the hell aren't we going after where we know there are pockets of legal people who are in the process in the country? So we're doing work to try to understand what that might look like as an opportunity to move forward on a couple of interesting fronts. And by way of example, if you look at employment clusters, that's already happening. It's happening in the healthcare field. It is happening in some of the manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing pieces. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. We are going to stay on schedule. John, I'll give you the last, but 2 minutes is what you got here.
No, I mean, I think this panel has nailed some really important points. And I said that I'd begin with pointing out how important it was to be outward facing. I'll end with that as well. And I think this panel has made that very clear. We need to be outward facing in terms of the opportunities that are available for Marathon County and Wausau, but around some very specific known strategies that have been effective. And if we follow that template, it doesn't guarantee success, but it certainly makes the path easier. So thank you again for allowing me to be part of this. It's always an honor.
Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, for this panel.